control. I started taking antidepressants, I started taking tranquilizers, I overused the tranquilizers, I started drinking on top of the tranquilizers. And really it was all to make myself feel better about myself.
More than 30 years ago, Andrew Madden served as an altar boy at Christ the King Church, Cabra in Dublin. When he grew out of that role, he continued to work in the parish, helping out with activities around the church.
I would have been quite quiet, and we were very well brought up, so I was quite polite. And sometimes I see children today, and maybe I see groups of children, and yeah, I can see children who would be the sort of child I would never have been, you know, quite loud, giving out, shouting, whatever. And then you see other quieter kids, polite, not putting themselves forward necessarily, and I can see that's the sort of child that I would have been. So I would have been quiet and shy, reserved, probably.
Father Ivan Payne was well respected in the parish. His charisma made him a popular figure in the community. Andrew Madden was 11 years old. He was delighted when Father Payne offered him a part-time job on Saturdays.
The first time it wasn't physical, because the first time it was verbal. I remember just noticing something one day. It was a warm summer morning, and I had served Mass, an early midday midweek Mass, like a Monday or Tuesday or something, during the summer holidays. And we were leaving the sacristy. It was a very, very warm day, and he said, "It's so hot, you're probably only wearing enough clothes to barely cover yourself." And I remember, even as I was, 11, 12 at most at the time, but I remember thinking it was very odd, a very odd thing to say. It seemed inappropriately intimate. And to me, it represented a verbal crossing of boundaries. Obviously, they weren't words I was using when I was 12, but looking back, that's what it was. That's why it jarred with me. And so that was the first thing. And then the next thing, I was asked to go down to his house. He as a reward for serving Mass during the week, during the summer holidays, which meant I was getting up out of bed early and going around to the church to serve 8 o'clock Mass. And so he said he would ask me down to his house for breakfast, when I had to get my parents' permission. And so I said that to my parents. They said yes, of course. And I'm very impressed that this priest would ask you down to his house for breakfast just because you served Mass. This was unprecedented. And I went down, and over a few visits, what I noticed was this was a priest who would put his arms around you. And there was another time where he would swear if something went wrong or whatever, spill something, and then he would be asking you what swear words you used. So looking back, what you can see, you were being encouraged to do things you might not necessarily do, like use bad language or use bad language in front of the priest. And so all of that seemed to be sort of getting you ready, breaking you down, seeing what you were like. And then at one stage there was the sort of putting his arms around you or giving you a hug maybe, and then it was see what sort of tickles you have, but it was all about getting his hands on you, and in a way that could be explained away as very innocent if you had objected in some way. And then that progressed on to sitting on the couch in his front room with his arms around you, but then his arm moving down to your genital area, and but sort of resting there on the outside of your clothing. And then the next time it would be on the inside of your clothing, and all the time it was just to see, is going to be an objection or whatever. And then when you haven't objected and you clearly haven't told anybody over a period of time, and he realised that he'd sort of tricked me into, or manipulated me, or I was, all the things a paedophile would know. This person's too afraid to tell anybody what's going on, and he's already let certain things go, and who would believe that, he sits on my couch watching television and I have my hand inside his trousers. Who's he going to say that to? And who's going to believe that of this priest with a full-time job at Archbishop's House? and a full church on a Sunday morning.
Andrew knew that what was happening to him was wrong, but he felt powerless to do anything.
Most of the time it consisted of molestation, and there were attempts made then by him to get me to do the same thing back, and I just physically wasn't able, because I suppose looking back it meant me taking a proactive role in it, and I wasn't able to. So when he was molesting me, I was just not acknowledging anything that was happening, and I was watching television. So this was always on the couch. Television was on, so my focus was the television, not to acknowledge in any way what was happening, and that was my coping mechanism. And I mean, I could be quite tense when I think back of what I was like, quite fearful and really quite rigid with fear and tension, and but just focused on the television, just not to acknowledge this at all. I remember in the very early stages, one time getting up, going to the bathroom and coming back. So by doing that, I basically rearranged my clothes properly. So we had my trousers open, for example, and things weren't where they were supposed to be. And when I came back from the bathroom, everything was back in order. So this was, but I remember being embarrassed at doing this, drawing attention. And I remember thinking, he's the one who should be embarrassed. And it was just a moment of some sort of clarity, but I still that was as strong as I could be, because when I went back into the room, I still sat down beside him. Now people might say, you should have sat in a different chair, but then you're making a statement. You're asking a 12-year-old boy to make a statement to an adult priest about what's going on, and it's not possible. It seems a very irrational thing to do as an adult, but it wasn't possible. So I made that little gesture, but then as soon as I came back, all I could do was go and sit in the same place again.
Andrew's life went into meltdown. In 1985, he moved to London, where he turned to alcohol, failed to hold down any relationships, and eventually tried to take his own life.
I was becoming more fearful as time went on. The only time I was okay was when I had drink on me. You know, I hated being in work from morning to lunchtime, because I felt I didn't have alcohol in my system. Now, there would have been alcohol in my system from the night before, but I didn't have a drink yet today. And I felt my defences were down, and I would be very self-conscious. And but I always in London, very lucky to live near where I worked in Westminster. Run home at lunchtime, a few large whiskies, 2 large whiskies maybe, and then back to work, and I'd feel, okay, I can take on the world. So there were times when I took overdoses. At one stage, I took a month's supply of one particular medication, and that you're not meant to drink with. And then I drank after it, and I was taken out of work in an ambulance.
In part 2, what happened when victims summoned up the courage to make a complaint?
Some of the pedophile priests were extremely devious in the way they manipulated their superiors, and how the superiors fell maybe too easily into the trap.
We have heard how boys and girls were subjected to terrible abuse at the hands of priests. Almost more horrifying is what happened next when some victims summoned up the courage to make a complaint.
Reading again the stories of the past, I can see how, in fact, at times some of the pedophile priests were extremely devious in the way they manipulated their superiors, and how the superiors fell maybe too easily into the trap.
I think we forget how much power the church had as an institution in our society, and how much influence individual priests and bishops wielded over these young children, their families and their communities. And I think that the scale of the abuses is matched only by the betrayal from that institution.